Hi everyone and welcome to Growth Leap. I'm your host, Michel Gagnon. We talk to pretty awesome business builders who are designing and growing meaningful and innovative companies. Our guest today has 19 years of experience in consumer technology, leading and transforming global marketing organizations, as well as developing innovative products. Today, Suzaan Sauerman is consultant, tech columnist, advisor, and investor with a clear focus on wearables and hearables in the fitness, wellness, and fashion space. Enjoy this very enlightening conversation with Suzaan Sauerman. Hi, Suzaan. Welcome to the show. Really happy to have you here. How are you?
Hey, Michelle. Thank you for setting this up, and I look forward to a great conversation.
Suzaan, you have something like 15 plus years of experience in marketing, product design. Just to get started, can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you're doing at the moment?
So yeah, as you said, I've got over, if I'm just counting some of the years, I think it's almost 19 years actually of working with different technology brands. But as you say, I've got a background in working with various technology brands, and specifically, with the global marketing organizations and product portfolios and digital transformation, and most recently actually creating, consumer product portfolios and experiences within hearables. I've been in corporate world until the beginning of last year, and then 2018, and then I decided to jump out of corporate world and started my own lifestyle tech consultancy. And the reason I call it a lifestyle tech consultancy, because one of the sort of repetitive habits I had over the past few years, specifically the past 5 years, when I've been very much involved with product development and marketing and sort of driving the overall brand perspective from a product perspective, I have to say that I've always written down, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And that has driven me to actually leave the corporate world and start my own consultancy, where I really focus on helping and also to transform this sort of the wellness, the fitness, and the fashion brands when they are intersecting with technology, specifically focused around wearables and hearables.
So you're a quite busy woman.
I am, yes.
And you will be in Berlin on late June 25th and 26th, to speak at the Wear It Innovation Summit. Can you tell us a bit about what you will be tackling in your speech?
Yeah, sure. So I will be focusing on wearables and hearables, specifically with a fashion angle. One of the sort of, I would say, let's focus a little bit on the wearable space. I've written a couple of articles where I've actually called out that wearables should really become part of the dress code. And I also believe the same for hearables, because it's part of your outfit. It should also just fit seamlessly into your lifestyle. I also believe that I'm a very strong believer that wearables need to be design-led instead of tech-led. And I would, there's so many examples in the market, but the most recent one is the Google and Levi's jacket, where Google actually admitted, this was a much better process than when they actually created their first smart glasses, because they really came from a tech angle instead from a design angle. And working with Levi's, that process changed, and they very much focused on the design of this actual denim jacket, adding the tech after design.
If you look at what Apple brought to the tech world, the whole minimalistic and design approach to building computers and iPhones and all and smartphones, do you still feel like wearables are tech driven, or do you feel like people are a bit more conscious of the design and the usability of the device or the tech?
Look, I think it's twofold. I really believe that some categories, like the rings, the smart rings, you've probably seen some of those.
Yeah.
When the initial ones came out about 2-3 years ago now, they were just not very good products. They didn't look good, they didn't feel good, and it was a bit clumsy. Of course, you had your first movers within tech who actually went out and bought those products and used it for a couple of weeks or a month, which we normally do, and then put it in a drawer and never to be seen again. But you've lost those consumers. They will never return to the ring format because they didn't have the best experience.
Yeah.
And today what we're seeing is companies like Motive coming out, and they have fantastic product on the market now. A product that actually looks good, it works very well, that I actually really like myself. And now the uptake is of course from the beginning a bit less because that category didn't work so well the first time it was released. So I feel sometimes in tech, and we have to wait a little bit before we release these products and really ask ourselves, are we solving a problem with this product, and is it really working? Coming back to Apple, I don't know if you saw last week, their results and the analyst discussions around Apple.
Yeah.
It's very clear Apple understand that, of course, with the iPhones and smartphones in general right now, reaching a kind of a plateau, and people are not changing phones, especially not at the prices we have to pay currently for them. And people are also looking for other ways to connect. And this is interesting because if you then look at what Apple, what they basically showed as their numbers for accessories, it is a massive part of their business, and they could almost spin that off as a separate business. So, and of course, that's a combination of some of the headphones they're going to release now. That's the AirPods, it's already out in the market, the HomePod, various other products. But I think it shows us that people out there, they are getting more comfortable with wearing, whether it's a tracker or a smartphone. People want to know more about their own fitness and wellness. But I don't think it's so much, it's never been tech-led, that's number one. But I think it's also we're moving away from it being very fitness-focused as well, right? Because we used to always see garments and, products that was all about fitness and really tracking my running or my cycling and really serious fitness.
Yep.
And now I think it's a general wellness tracking that we see emerging. And, that's when it becomes interesting because all of a sudden, wherever you wear this wearable, whether it's wrist or ear or actually on your body, it could also be, they're talking about hair bands. You want it to look good because you want it to fit in every single day with what you're wearing.
One of the things that we care about at Stanana is technology for a purpose, right? And you've mentioned I've read somewhere that you say you help companies develop tech products, services that solve problems in the real world. One of the reasons I was really interested in interviewing you was that I will really want to have your perspective on where things are going. And I think you've touched on this a bit in your previous answer, but I have the feeling that everybody or everything is going to become a wearable. And there is a danger or a downside to this. What's your view on this?
Michelle, I completely agree with you. Your second last sentence. I'm under the same view that I believe that we're moving more towards wearables. I think it will take a longer time than we thought to really get sensors integrated into our sort of what I would call everyday wear. And then I'm specifically looking at the fashion world and how slow the fashion and the tech world have actually been to integrate. I think all of us expected this to happen much faster. But of course, there's many reasons for that. But I do believe we're moving away from only a phone environment, only a screen. Let's call it a screen, right, that you have in front of you.
Yeah.
If you look what's also emerging, voice, of course, and voice assistant usage. But in general, we're starting to see an experiment with voice. It's still, in its very early stages with Siri and Hey Google, but we all know that there's a huge focus on getting voice fixed and actually making voice work. So based on that, I think we're moving towards a world where we will see products that we can interact with through speaking with it. And to me, that is a much more humanized way of dealing with tech. Mm-hmm. Because we use our voices as human beings. I mean, you and I, we're sitting here, we're not texting each other for a podcast. Yeah. We're actually speaking to each other. So that part really excites me. And what I'm trying to sort of also figure out is if we're moving towards a voice environment, also because we know the screens are not so good for us, but of course, it's never going to stop all the content we've got now. But if it's going to be led through voice, what happens when we're actually wearing devices on our body? Do we also speak to them? Is it actually touch of the device that will guide us? But I'm totally convinced that in about 5 years from now, everybody will wear some kind of sensor on their body during the day. And we will be speaking more to the internet, which means we will not be looking that much at our screens. And that means that we will be potentially leaving our phones behind more and more.
And there was a really interesting talks that you gave, I believe was last year. And you referred to a notion from the 1930s that was saying something like science finds industry applies and man conforms. And you argued that given today's screen addiction issues and stuff like online dating, this rather tech-centric statement is proving to be true. So would you see that humans are bad at adapting to technology, or we're just bad at designing tech?
Oh, that's an interesting question, right? You remember the quote that we saw from one of the engineers who designed the iPhone that said, if he designed the iPhone today and he himself have small kids, he probably would have thought about designing it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
I'm a bit mixed on this one. I think there is definitely in the design, I think Apple is probably the best when it comes to thinking about the user first. And they were also the first movers in saying, okay, we now need to add screen time and we will give you these tools so you can actually monitor yourself. The other side of it is I also really believe that, as humans, we change our behavior. We get used to being able to access everything at the same time. And of course, I think it's also up to us to learn how to deal with all the content that is around us, right? How to shift through it.
Yeah.
I feel, it's just blaming the technology for our usage, sort of for us also becoming addicted to it. I'm not saying it's our fault, but I really think we should also take some responsibility for that. But just coming back to the point of design, what I do find is that in most cases, I've mentioned a couple of brands now, some of the bigger brands, but in most of the consumer tech spaces, and this is also an area for me where I'm constantly every day thinking, how do we do this better, is when we think of a product, how do we actually design it with the person in mind first? And then we figure out the technology and everything we have to put in the product much later, but really, really concentrate on how will that product be used? How will the user use it? What is the few features we have to put in it? What problem will it solve? And also, what solution will it bring? Because I also believe today that the wearables are still confirming in general to us. It's just confirming to us what we already know. So you've slept badly last night. You didn't walk your 10,000 steps yesterday. What it doesn't do, it doesn't actually turn it into so what should I do now? And I think that sort of, to me, is the next level. And that's what really excites me and motivates me about this space.
Yeah, there's not the so what of or any actionable recommendation that comes with the data yet, right?
No, exactly. If you think about it, when you've slept badly, like I track my sleep. And, I usually wake up before my alarm, and we can all feel when we've had a bad night's sleep when you wake up.
Yep.
You feel it in your body. So I would love for it then to tell me, because my smartphone keeps exact track of where I go every single day, and it can see in my calendar when my first appointment is. And I speak to Siri every day. So it's kind of like it knows my route now. So it should then kind of almost point me either to say you should eat some food which can restore some cells. I mean, just as a guidance, if you've had a bad night's sleep, and I know bananas tends to be good for you. So it's like, why doesn't it just kind of start to give some solutions?
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't walked your 10,000 steps and you get home, maybe it can just push you to say, you know what, if you just walk 2 blocks from your house twice, you will actually have made your steps up. That's also nice to get home and to feel the fresh air outside.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much connectivity on a smartphone. And if you then think about the application to you and to me in our daily lives, just bringing some of these elements together and kind of giving us that, so what should you do now? What is the kind of a solution? I just think that's when we're starting to solve problems. And that's where we have to go with wearables and hearables for that matter as well.
I want to keep deep diving on this, but before, I'd like to understand a bit the design process that you follow. So could you, as concretely as possible, walk us through the process that you follow when you're helping a brand design a new product or build an inspiring story and experience?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, it's a combination. Sometimes it can be actually wearing on a physical hardware, and other times it can be actually working on the software part, which is normally an app.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, by the way, I think every single product that you connect with, they have software, hardware. I mean, there's nothing in between, and it's one product. I don't see it as 2 parts.
Yeah.
So to me, the story is all about, so how does this work together, and how do you use that? How do you use this together as an overall solution? So the process usually start with, this is my process, and this is the process that I've been driving, for the last, I would say, specifically focusing on this the last 6 years. Always starting with the user. So figuring out from day one, if let's say we're making some kind of wearable, really, really understanding, is it for fitness? Is it for wellness? What is this wearable going to do? And then looking at the consumers that we've identified and really picking a group, because I think that is the only way you really start to get down to details. And when I say group, I mean, usually you would do a segmentation of the market, whichever area you're focusing on. So let's say, you really want to go into a specific fitness product. Then you would always have different levels of fitness or even different sports that you might go after. You might say, I want to make something for running, or I want to make something for people who do CrossFit specifically. So really focus on that segment and actually pull out a person and identify and really obsess about that user. Really, really obsess. Like, how do they actually use this product in the moment that you're creating for? But at the same time, think about the secondary usage. So if it's a wearable, it's probably a product that they probably want to keep with them all day. So what does that tell you? And how should it then fit into what I call the ecosystem? So that can be your Apple Health, it can be your Google Health, and what kind of software application or app should be created for this product to really, really work well, and taking that and integrating that into the different health kits of the different smartphones. But to me, that's sort of the process. And then, of course, there's specific features that will scream out because you've identified who that user is. And then do not choose to have like 15 different features inside a product or offerings, because most consumers, they're buying a product for one or two main features. And that is actually what they want it for, but they want it to work so well.
Yeah.
And this is the mistake I see so many times. When I walk in retail, I see these boxes with about 20 features and screaming and shouting at you. And it's so confusing. You actually don't even know yourself, but is it for my wrist? And I want something that's more like jewelry, but this sounds more like a computer. I mean, what does this do? So people actually get confused in the moment of looking at it. And to me, it's just keep it so simple, remove all the complexity, and just have like two main features that this user is really after, and focus on that. And then you start to work what I would call with the engineers, both hardware, software, and you really identify those features and you really go after, and then you look at how you get it to fit in whatever design or format that you've already decided on based on the lifestyle of these users. Mm-hmm. Today, I would say that it's no one's fault in the industry, but that process doesn't run like that. It's very much, we have the tech, and because we have the tech, we should make the product. Mm-hmm. And then we end up in discussions about 20 features, cutting that down. And every time you add features into a product, you add cost to the product.
Yeah.
And to me, instead of adding cost to a product, why don't we rather focus on just making the design so good, where people actually go, wow, this is an amazing product, an amazing experience. And they will be happy with just 2 or 3 main features.
And do you see, your last point was pretty interesting. The process in real life does not happen like that. Who usually is in the room, and how is that team different from the team you've worked with, 10 years ago?
Well, you always have your designers in the room, and usually you would have your customer insights or an anthropologist working with you. Plus, of course, I would say a voice from the product and marketing group. And then I would always want, depending on what kind of product you're making, again, whether it's a physical wrist-worn or earwear, you would have the engineers in the room as well as the software engineers, then actually developing, the experience for the app. The way I think that process runs the best is to have everybody in the room from the first day. But instead of beginning the discussion with, we have this amazing technology, you start the discussion with, we have this amazing user, and we really want to focus on, as I said, whether it's wellness or fitness or just a general tracker that we want to create. And we have segmented, we've actually profiled, and we found a group of users that we want to cater for. We know what's important in their lives, and these are the 2 main things we want to bring out in this product. Then it's always interesting for me to watch the designers, because normally what would happen is you would take the tech and There would be always rules around the technology. It needs to be this size. It needs to be this big. We can only fit this into the product from engineers. And then the designers just have to accept that list, that very, very long list, and turn that into something that sort of almost look good. And what I like to do is I like to look at the designers. And of course, when I say designers, it's usually product designers that have done this before, that have been good at this and understand, again, how people live with these products. And I like them actually to go away because most of them, they actually also understand what needs to go inside the product. And they would go away and they would actually come up and then they would push, of course, very hard on what engineering wants to put inside, because they would always push that because they are actually designing for everyday life. They are designing a true wearable. What I always call a true wearable is something, it fits me, it works with me, it's kind of for every day. And that's always what I push designers on. For me, that's why I always like the designers to be the one taking the lead in that. And then we have, of course, the discussions about, the technology that needs to go inside the product. And then we can work around and we can see, okay, do we need to move it around a little bit here and there? But to me, that is really, really key to the process.
If you look at the iPhone, for instance, which became a bit the mother of all devices, we used to have a digital camera, a phone, a desktop, laptop, etc. And with that device, you ended up consolidating a lot of things, and which, apart from the design, the touch screen, that integration aspect or element was extremely strong and attractive from a user's perspective. So when you look at wearables, hearables in the fitness, sport space, do you feel that something similar is going to happen?
I think so. I think something very similar will happen. And I have to say, I'm very surprised on a daily basis that it hasn't happened faster. There's quite some people in the industry that are thinking the same way and thinking, how do we consolidate all of this, right? So the wearables, so your daily sort of, I would say, activity, or whether it's a hearable that you wear. But think about then when you get inside your house, okay, and you want to then put the content back in your house, right? You want to move content around even more.
Yeah.
And by content, I mean, whatever you're doing on your wearable or your hearable, and you want to consolidate that even more by using your voice. I mean, we've got to believe that we're going to have much, much more integration, bringing it all together as almost like I would say, a human dashboard, right? But it has to come together because right now things feel very much in separate areas. And I guess that's what you're referring to. It feels very much a lot of the data that we track on ourselves, information that we have on ourselves, sits very separately.
There's also the aspect of if you have a smartwatch, you have some sort of a smart T-shirt, you have a ring. You don't need 20 wearables to track your fitness and your health status.
No,
right?
You will decide how you want to wear it.
Yeah. So my question is a bit more: what else or what other features or problems are we going to fix?
There's definitely a trend out there. I think you're aware of this. The overall, if you look at the macro trend, that we all want to live longer.
Yeah.
That is more about overall wellness. And so in terms of key features, to me, it sounds like, it could be health, it could be medical. It's understanding what's happening on your skin. It's understanding, are you taking in enough light during the day? Understanding the air conditions around you. I think it becomes much more wider in terms of understanding what really happens around your everyday movements. And I think we'll see some features like also, we've got the smart shoes. You've probably seen those appearing right now. And I think there's a lot of focus on that. Recently, there's been a lot of talk around hairbands as well, becoming wearables. There's a fine line between medical and wellness.
Yes.
But there is definitely something in PreCuring as well. And I'll explain a little bit around that.
Mm-hmm.
If you run, how do you prevent that you end up with a runner's knee? So could you actually, because, when you're running, you're kind of using your knees all the time. And we all know we have different funny ways of running. And over time, you actually wear out your knee. And that's when people say, oh, I've got a runner's knee, I can never run again.
Yeah.
But what if you actually had something while you run that's telling you, listen, you're leaning too much to the right. You need to position yourself, straighten up your back, run in a slightly different way. And it's actually guiding you and preventing you from getting that.
Yeah. So the idea is to add a prevention aspect
Exactly.
to the product.
Exactly. And you can take that to many places, right? You can take that into offices. Think about that, how people are sitting in front of screens.
Yes.
What we are doing to our backs and our necks and our elbows. And to me, that those features, this is where it becomes really, really exciting, because the prevention that we actually, before people actually get to a point where they are in pain, that motivates me every day. And I'm also starting to work more and more with companies who are actually creating products in that space.
Where do you see the biggest technological development happening in the next few years? Is this more, let's say, on the software side, or on the actual products, the fabrics, the electronic components that we use?
And look, to me, it's definitely going to be on the software. It's all about the ecosystem you are developing. I do not see a world we walk away completely from hardware. I don't think we ever will see that. But I believe that there will be less, hardware, and I really hope better designed hardware. I would rather have that we have less wearables out there, but really well designed, really thought through, more what I would call gender neutral, because I feel it's still very, very masculine out there. And, just asking for gender neutral, I think, is a big topic still. But I really believe if you want to focus on the future, it's definitely the software offering, and it's definitely the services that you offer as a brand.
Okay. 2 points, gender neutral, and the other one is I've seen a lot of wearables where you just see a bunch of cables and sensors connected and hidden somewhere. There's a question I like to ask. There's always a downside to new technological development. If you look at 3D printing, there's a lot of potential waste coming out of that. And, a cotton-made T-shirt is probably better for the environment than a T-shirt that has a bunch of electronic components in it. Have you seen any efforts or early people, in their design being environmental conscious?
Look, I think in the technology parts and pieces, I haven't seen that yet. But I also see that as sort of the next focus. Like, how do we make technology more sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
I started looking at this about a year and a half ago, specifically around hearables. And this was more around sort of the headphone space, starting to look at what materials could you use? Could you do the same as what, let's say, for example, Stella McCartney is doing in the fashion world?
Mm-hmm.
And really start, and Adidas, with some of the materials they're using, instead of using these heavy materials for headphones. And to me, that was also another, headphones for me have always been one of those products that's been very masculine, very harsh, very big, very, unless you want the in-ear, your other option is to have really big headphones. And I've always said, why can't we make something that's a little bit more like sunglasses?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the same kind of concept, I can wear it and then I can beautifully fold it up when I get to my destination. And it's a bit like sunglasses fitting into a beautiful case.
Yeah.
And it fits my style, and it really works. And so, at that point, I was really pushing, also for, could we use sustainable material in that instance? I haven't really seen that, Michelle. I haven't really seen that come out. I think some of the wearables, some of the straps and the wrist-worn ones, they are experimenting a little bit with that right now, but I haven't seen anybody really pushing through with that.
At the Wear It Innovation Summit, you'll also participate in a panel about women in tech. Mm-hmm. And not so long ago, Emily Chang, who's the journalist and host of Bloomberg Technology, recently published a book entitled Brotopia, Breaking the Boys Club of Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. And she talks about the culture and how it seems to stick, that boys club culture that seems to stick even in the face of widespread criticism. So if I remember correctly, you've worked in San Francisco and you have years of experience collaborating with engineers and tech company.
Yeah.
Are things getting better for women in tech?
Look, I think absolutely it is, but I still think it's a very slow in progress. For me, it's, I know we always talk about women in tech. I guess I've always been one of those women who's always been there with the engineers and who's always been in this male world. Also, when you look at my background and you look at some of the brands I worked for, did it actually bother me? No, not during my career. I've been lucky enough to have some amazing mentors around me, all men so far. And so in that way, I would say no. I mean, I've obviously also been in Silicon Valley, as you referred to. And for me, I guess I'm a little bit more, I sort of just stumble in it. And then I use my sort of the fact that I am a woman and sort of, just find my own path and my own way within that. I think the overall integration of women onto boards, women within that tech space is not happening as fast. And that's worldwide, by the way. I don't think there's one part of the world where it's not happening. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, I live in Denmark, and it's simply everywhere. And it's also because of the old structure way, how we've always looked at those positions, that everybody had to be a CEO or CFO at least. And then, of course, you've got the history. So how on earth can people actually get to that level that fast? If you're a woman, how can you move as fast as the men have if you haven't done that? So I think it's a much bigger discussion specifically for the women in tech. But what excites me is that you see more women getting into coding, and that you see more women actually naturally becoming founders of some of the tech startups. I would like to see a lot more myself. I would like to be one of them one day myself too. And, I really believe that, and that excites me because I think there is more space for it. However, I do still believe that when we talk about technology, I think it is still very gender biased in general, meaning that I think the products, and I'm talking across consumer tech, is mostly male skew. And even though if you look at when women are buying consumer tech, that is actually over 75% of all consumer tech that are bought by women.
Oh, really?
And that's backed up by insights from 2016. And it's always interesting for me because, of course, I have a lot of consumer tech that I test and use, and I sometimes give it to some of my male friends and some of my girlfriends. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is men always take products and are super excited and open the box and go, presses the button and go, how does it work?
Yeah.
Right? That's the question.
Yeah.
And when you give it to a woman, they don't even open the box. They just look at it. And then they say, what does it do for me? And, those two different questions have really intrigued me. And actually, I shouldn't talk too much about it, but I'm actually busy writing a book about that.
Oh, interesting.
Within consumer tech. So it's not that far, but, I've started to work on that because I think that alone there's so much to talk about in that. I also remember one day an engineer saying to me, because I said, we have to ensure that we can wear a specific product on the body instead of actually wearing it, needing pockets or needing anywhere to put it.
Yeah.
And I remember him just looking at me saying, but can't you just do that on your phone? And then I looked at him and I was wearing a dress and I said, but can you see that I don't have anywhere to put my phone? So I guess it's these kind of silly conversations, where if you then angle the question towards that, I think we have a long way to go. And I don't think that changes overnight.
And just to, finish on that, and I don't want to take too much of your time, it's getting late. We usually talk about challenges that women face in the tech sector. What, and you briefly touched on that, what opportunities that you see for women?
I feel there's a lot more female founders appearing, and it excites me that we see that more and more, and also that we see specific VCs actually focusing on female founders. I think that's really great. And then as I said earlier, we also see more women actually going after the sort of the design within tech and the coding and really getting involved on the software side. And that excites me. Because as you can imagine, I think there's also going to be a lot to fix for us, right? Because we are now addicted to screens. So how do we fix that? So I do believe, that there's some positive signs. And it excites me a lot to see more women entering the tech world for sure.
I read, or I don't know if it was a podcast or an article that I saw a while back. It was really interesting because people were saying that VCs are pretty much a male world, and that, having VCs with more women will also help female founders, because VCs with more female will see opportunities where a male don't necessarily see it because they don't necessarily buy the products and all of that. So that's also an exciting part or development that will definitely help women in tech.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Well, thank you so much, Suzaan. We will see you in Berlin at the end of June, June 25th and 26th. You will be speaking at the Wear It Innovation Summit. Thanks a lot for your time, even if it's late on Sunday night, and looking forward to meeting you in person.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for having me. And I look forward to meeting you.
All right, that's it for today, my friends. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do not hesitate to connect with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you want, wherever we are. And check us out at stunana.com. Thanks again for listening. Hasta la vista.